It's easy to blame the artifact for the problem instead of the person, because the person has a philosophy, they have a religious creed, they come from some group, whatever it may be. So therefore, to blame them is to take a personal attack upon a group within our society. But if you come and you attack a firearm, which is a totally inert device, nobody is going to complain. So it's an easy way for them to get out of the problem of gun crime without functionally doing anything to solve it.
As the Canadian Taxpayers Federation has adroitly noted, quote, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's gun ban and buyback policy is running out of steam, and it hasn't even left the station, end quote. As the CTF notes, the buyback plan is completely broken. Law-abiding firearms owners don't want to lose their guns. Meanwhile, if you can imagine, this scheme doesn't go far enough when it comes to gun control advocates who, well, lack understanding about firearms, their mantra being all guns are bad, all guns should be banned. Meanwhile, guess who will be picking up the tab for this inherently flawed policy that will garner zero tangible results? Yes, as per usual, it will be you, the ever-beleaguered taxpayer. And as for the Justin Trudeau Liberals, the solution is to ban yet more types of guns in the months ahead. Now, keep in mind that Ottawa's buyback program has already cost taxpayers $67 million since 2020. $67 million, and not a single gun has been bought back yet. Unbelievable. And joining me now is Ron Craig, a firearms and explosives expert based in Oakville, Ontario, who is going to provide his top 5 reasons why Bill C-21, subtitled Keeping Canadians Safe from Gun Crime, is inherently flawed and should be put in a paper shredder.
We will ban military-style assault rifles and start a buyback program for all military-grade weapons that were legally purchased.
We're not running around the streets shooting people up. We do have a rising gang violence problem, and that's been completely ignored in this. So it's a slap in the face to everybody.
We will move forward with the buyback program in the coming months and complete the prohibition to ensure these weapons cannot be legally used, transferred, transported, bequeathed, or sold.
These guns make it easier to commit mass murder.
We're introducing legislation to implement a national freeze on handgun ownership.
Firearms are flying off store shelves in our city after the federal Liberals introduced gun control reforms last week.
Stop targeting legal gun owners. Go after real criminals.
It's doubling down on a path that has been proven to be ineffective. Focus on bad guys.
This was a group of individuals who seemed alarmingly comfortable not only carrying illegal firearms, but also treating them like props at a party.
Try and stem the smuggling trade for firearms. No. Liberals have always, for the 30 years they've been trying to control guns, they have always gone after law-abiding gun owners.
So Ron, first of all, thank you so much for coming down to the studio and joining me. And I'm looking over your reasons. And here we have the first reason why this gun grab law is essentially a dead dog with fleas is, according to yourself, banning 22 caliber firearms because they are assault style is nonsensical and will not reduce crime or improve public security. But wait a minute, I thought the whole reason behind this law, according to the Justin Trudeau Liberals, Ron, was to make Canadians safer.
Right.
They wouldn't be lying about that, would they?
Oh, absolutely. So there are a number of 22 caliber rifles that don't look like your grandfather's rifle, which was a walnut stock and a blued barrel in action. They look like assault rifles. They actually look like an MP5 submachine gun, which is a full automatic and is banned in Canada. Nobody can own it. But this fires a 22 caliber cartridge, and it's not full automatic. It requires a separate squeeze of the trigger for each shot. But it's fun to shoot. And also, a German firm started to make replicas of Second World War military firearms for 22 rimfire. So these firearms were the first assault rifles. So they look like that, but they fire a 22 rimfire round. To my knowledge, I don't know anybody that's ever robbed a bank or used one in commission of a crime that is a .22 assault-style rifle.
And Ron, more to the point, I think, especially for those who don't know anything about guns, aren't into gun culture, how lethal is a .22 caliber bullet?
Sure, no question that if it hits the right spot, you're going to die. But the point of the matter is that it is the lowest power cartridge that you can possibly shoot, right? So you would have to be crazy to go with serious intent with a .22 rimfire to do anything. It's used to varmint control.
Yes.
It's used in virtually every farmer has one, although it's probably a bold action. But the point is, and this is important, if you take someone to the range to teach them range safety and how to use a firearm safely, they've seen, and the young person I'm speaking of, they've seen Tour of Duty, they've looked at all the video games, and they look at a rifle that has a walnut stock, again, that looks like your grandfather's rifle, and what they say is, what is that? But if you show them one of these modern semi-automatic .22 rimfire rifles that look like an assault rifle, they get into it. So you can teach them safety, safe gun handling. You can teach them exactly how to load, how to unload safely. So in other words, it's a teaching tool. So by preventing that, they've not enhanced public safety. What they essentially have done is taken away something that the gun public likes to shoot.
Incredible. Let's go to number 2. Controlling cartridge magazines by requiring a PAL to purchase will not reduce crime and is a feel-good measure designed to generate public support. You know, Ron, I think what you're getting at there, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I see a divide in Canada, you know, city mouse, country mouse. There are people who are absolutely all about banning every gun, even toy guns, and I kid you not. They probably don't understand the nuances. So what are you getting at by this whole business of controlling the cartridge magazines?
So for the last number of years, every magazine that's legally owned in Canada and can be sold in Canada has 10-round capacity.
Okay.
So even if the magazine was originally made for 17 rounds or 15 rounds or less or more, it's limited to 10, right?
Okay.
So why would a criminal who's using an illegal gun want to have a magazine that has a 10-round capacity? If you take a look at when they do a gun and gang sweep and you look at the firearms that are on the table, without exception, they're a full cap magazine. That means the magazines have not been pinned for 10 rounds. They actually will hold the number of rounds that they were designed to hold, which in many cases is 15. So by going after the magazines, you're not really enhancing public safety at all, because the gun that's using the magazine is illegal and is being used for an illegal purpose.
And you know, Ron, isn't that the crux of the matter, is that no matter what you ban, no matter what you make legal and illegal in terms of firearms, the criminals are not going to follow the rules. They're not going to follow the legislation. That's what makes them criminals.
Well, exactly. If you deal drugs and you're dealing with large sums of money, it's an occupational hazard that someone else will probably have a gun and wants to take both those items from you. So if you don't have a gun, you're at a disadvantage. So therefore, if you're a criminal, you're going to carry a firearm because you need it in conjunction with your work. So they don't follow any rules. My favorite story about smuggling guns occurred a few years ago. It was a University of Toronto student. He was working on his master's degree. He started to bring handguns in from the United States. And at first what he would do is he would put 10 or 12 handguns in a bag and he would hide them in his car. He was so easily put through customs that he started leaving the bag on the seat beside him. He never got stopped or queried once. And the only reason he got caught is he sold a gun to an undercover police officer who then started to do an investigation, and they determined he was moving guns. That's how callous some people are in supplying illegal firearms to criminals. So why does the government feel that by limiting a magazine, you're going to actually prevent crime?
And you know, Ron, isn't the real reason when it comes to the safety of Canadians, I don't know, locking up the bad guys? Just last night in the Moss Park area of Toronto, around 10:30, and you know, there's a lot of people out on a Thursday night, you know, make no mistake. There was an incident involving a man in a Hummer. He had rammed several police cruisers, almost ran down a police officer. They finally apprehended him. Guess what? He was out on bail for auto theft and evading police, involved in a car chase, and He had 70 prior charges. Later this afternoon, he'll have his bail hearing. What do you want to bet? He's going to be let out on bail again. Isn't that the root of the problem, as opposed to, I don't know, a duck hunter in Saskatchewan?
Well, I totally agree. An ordinary civilian is terrified of getting a criminal record for doing anything against the Gun Control Act. The criminals have learned that no matter what they do, they're going to be let out on bail, and it's business as usual. One of my favorite stories, it was in Hamilton, Ontario, and a guy had been caught with a gun committing a crime. He was in court. A prohibition order was ordered against him. That means that he's not allowed to have in his possession a firearm. As he was walking from the court to his car, somebody slipped him a handgun, and the police rearrested him, right? And he had 3 prior prohibition orders against him. They don't follow the rules. They don't follow the regulations. They have no fear of the law because it has no consequences.
And the end result is they just get further emboldened because they know this federal government loves hug a thug. Number 3, Ron, shipping prohibited firearms to Ukraine is not only ridiculous, but will be unwanted. Ron, come on, don't you want to give the Ukrainians a fighting chance against Mother Russia?
Well, sure. So you have to understand how a military works. You just don't give a person a gun and send them to the front, because that person is going to need ammunition, which probably isn't in the supply chain. They're also going to need repairs if something goes wrong with it, which means spare parts. They have to be trained to use it or they're going to die on the battlefield. And besides, why would you want to do that when the government, what was it, $50 billion that the President of the United States just gave Ukraine? Well, they can buy their own firearms and, in fact, have a conduit of firearms from most of the countries in Europe that will sell to them. So why do they want a .22 rifle that looks like an assault rifle?
And, Ron, how effective is a .22 rifle against, an armored vehicle, a tank?
Right. And here's another issue. You're right. It's totally not going to do anything. But all the soldiers today are wearing flak jackets or they're wearing bulletproof vests, and it would stop in the first 2 layers.
Wow.
They wouldn't even know they'd been hit. It's like totally ridiculous.
Unbelievable.
But what it does is it plays to the sentiment of the public that, we're getting rid of these dangerous guns, but we're actually doing some good with them.
Yeah. Sending Ukrainians basically useless paperweights.
That's
when
right.
you think about it. Unbelievable. Number 4, Ron, the ban enacted 2 years ago that prohibited the sale of transfer of handguns has not affected gun crime rates or reduced crime. In fact, the Surrey Police and the Toronto Police Association note that gun crime has exploded since the ban.
Correct.
Does not compute. What's going on?
So we should go back to a moment in time when you could own any type of handgun as long as you were a legal owner. So if it had a short barrel or it was a minor caliber, a 22, 25 caliber, 32 caliber, you could own that firearm. Then legislation was enacted saying that if the barrel length was less than a certain amount or it was a certain caliber, that is in prohibited status. Okay, but they did allow people that owned the prohibited handguns to keep them and to take them to the range and shoot them. By an arbitrary judgment, they just decided, the chief provincial firearms officer in Ontario said, you no longer can take those guns that you legally own, that are prohibited, that you have gone through all the hoops to actually get acquisition of, you can't take them to the range and shoot them anymore. And it's just absolutely nonsensical because...
And Ron, and let me add this, sorry to cut you off, but let's keep in mind, these aren't gangbangers. These are law-abiding, tax-paying sport shooters, hunters, who are not wearing trouble on their shirt, mean no other individual any harm. Again, it seems crazy, this inordinate amount of attention and money is being spent trying to fix a problem that does not exist.
So there's a reason behind it, in my humble opinion. It's easy to blame the artifact for the problem instead of the person, because the person has a philosophy, they have a religious creed, they come from some group, whatever it may be. So therefore, to blame them is to take a personal attack upon a group within our society. But if you come and you attack a firearm, which is a totally inert device, nobody is going to complain. So it's an easy way for them to get out of the problem of gun crime without functionally doing anything to solve it.
Well, Ron, following that logic, to reduce traffic fatalities, we should ban the car.
Well, that's right. But there's another element to it as well. By arbitrarily banning a whole bunch of firearms, think about the poor retailer that was following all of the laws, paying a tremendous amount for insurance, which is a requirement. And as a result, one day he wakes up and finds out, or she finds out, oh, I have 25 firearms I can't sell because they're now prohibited. And what are they going to do with them? Well, the government, in all of their glory, will offer them a small amount of money, but it's a financial hit that they've taken. And imagine this. Let us suppose that happened to somebody that sells car parts. And let's say that firm was selling carburetors. Well, we know that cars don't use carburetors, but older cars do. And one day the government decides, oh, it's polluting the environment, we're going to ban them. And now the person that has all these carburetors can't sell them. And it's the same thing. It's an interference in lawful business because they can't anticipate how the rules are going to change.
Unbelievable. Either they don't know, or what I think, they just don't care, Ron.
No, they don't care. You're right.
Number 5, controlling the sale of handguns, slides, and barrels will not reduce crime, but is an attempt to stop the manufacture of ghost guns. Ron, what in the world is a ghost gun?
Sure. So a ghost gun is a gun that is a real gun, but usually it's the bottom. It's usually a Glock that they go after because the Glock has a polymer or a synthetic bottom to it and a metal top. And so therefore, on a 3D printer, you can take a program and you can turn out a bottom for a Glock that doesn't have a serial number. All firearms, or particularly the Glocks, they have a serial number that's stamped into the actual frame. If you put it together from a 3D printer, it doesn't have a serial number, so the police can't trace it. So then what the person does is they have to buy the slide and they have to buy the barrel and they have to buy the magazine because those are the hardest items to manufacture and you can't manufacture them on a 3D printer. So the idea is by causing those parts to be not available or to be restricted, we're going to stop ghost guns. I pretty much can tell you that anybody that has serious intent on their mind is going to get around that. It just is a handicap for legal gun owners.
You know, it's unbelievable, Ron. I mean, when I look at the numbers, Ottawa's buyback program has already cost taxpayers $67 million since 2020 alone. Not a single gun has been bought back yet. But even worse, there was a tangible example that these buyback programs don't work. I looked to New Zealand, and here's the data from the New Zealand police. Violent firearm offenses averaged 932 a year in New Zealand. The year of the buyback in that country, there were 1,142 offenses. By 2022, the number of offenses was up to 1,444. So in other words, 300 more offenses, despite millions and millions of dollars in terms of a buyback. Didn't work in New Zealand. Why did the Trudeau Liberals think it's going to work here?
What they're doing is they actually are appealing to an audience that doesn't want any firearms at all. I believe it's 80% of councillors a short time ago in Toronto voted that they didn't want any guns at all in Toronto. So therefore, what you're doing by putting out those meaningless expressions of hope to people that are hoping they somehow will curb gun crime is they're placating their audience, which is we don't want any guns anyway. What you have to understand is the government doesn't even know who owns some of the prohibited guns. So there were a whole category of guns that were sold to people many years ago that they've owned lawfully, legally, they keep in their gun safe, that the government arbitrarily decided are now prohibited, they can no longer be used, and they want them back. Who has those guns? The government doesn't have any data on it.
And even if that data were to surface, Ron, who goes door to door collecting it? Remember, there was a cockamamie idea of having Canada Post do this. They said, no thanks. And then the government reached out, I understand, to retired RCMP officers. And I understand from my sources that that is going over like a lead balloon because these officers don't want to be cast in the role of a bad guy. They know that the sport shooter, the hunter, that's not the problem in terms of guns and criminality. And they don't want to be, the bad guy going door to door, creating aggro for honest, law-abiding taxpayers. So, I mean, who's going to carry out this program if it ever does get off the ground.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, there are some of the prohibited handguns that they are going to, quote, buy back are registered to owners, so they know that the owner has them.
Yeah.
And every owner received a letter saying the gun laws have changed and be aware that you own something that you no longer can shoot. You have to keep it locked up, and it's going to be part of this buyback program. But they don't know about the guns that were not registered. In other words, there was no way to assign direct ownership of that firearm to the person to determine who has it. And there are thousands of those firearms out there. It's going to take years to get all of them off. And many people who are not involved in the gun industry, who do not follow gun news, are going to own something that's prohibited that they have no idea is prohibited.
Ron, I just, again, I don't get it. Maybe I'm being too naive here, but when the government sends those letters, you cannot shoot this gun. Let's be very clear. These are sport shooters, guys like yourself. Mm-hmm. I know you go to the Toronto Revolver
Correct.
Club, completely safe and secure facility, not a single incident in decades of operation. So what is the problem in shooting this now prohibited gun that in a gun club that 'twas ever thus?
So 2 weeks before they made the announcement you couldn't shoot them at a gun club, it was legal to shoot them at a gun club, and now it's not. So how is that going to contribute to public safety? Because it was safe all through the years that the people took them to the range and shot them. I believe, I really have a strong feeling that what the government is doing is making it more and more difficult to do a firearms-related hobby. So therefore, if the ranges are reduced, if the number of guns you can take to the range are reduced, if what you can shoot at the range is reduced, people are going to say it's not worthwhile having guns. Well, as soon as the government hears there's nothing you can do with a gun except perhaps hunt the wily buck, they're going to say, well, why do you need it then? So therefore, we want it back. So what this is, I think, is a very purposeful strategy to cause people to not want to have the firearms they have so the government can harvest them in and no one eventually will have firearms.
I think you're right, Ron. I think this is all about demonizing and vilifying the gun community, be it sport shooters or hunters. And really, folks, I think this is all about the Justin Trudeau Liberals reaching out to one of their few bases that remain, anti-gun zealots, that every gun is bad, every firearm is illegal. And I would say to these diehard Liberal supporters, come on, ignorance is bliss, isn't it? But they would respond, I don't know what that means, but I'm happy. In any event, Ron, thank you so much, David, for coming in. Appreciate it.